Hi, I'm currently leveling a Guardian. Is my class going to be viable in the endgame as a DPS? This is a very common question among new players and aspiring raiders, so let's answer it. If you are a new player watching this video, I'm sorry it will be a bit more complicated at times. For now, you need not worry about the class choice. The conclusion of the video will be that your class has at least one viable DPS build and you do have a place in the endgame of PvE, no matter which class you want to main. In other games, players get the idea that there are only a few viable DPS classes. Class X is only a tank, Class Y has no damage, it can only be played as a healer. Some classes can't be played in the endgame at all. So it is natural that players have those questions and worries in Guild Wars 2. Will they just be excluded from endgame content? I hope we can all agree that this is not the case. I'd say all DPS classes are viable. But is there a way to precisely define viability? Let's try it. I claim if your class is viable as a DPS class on the raid boss Murzat Overseer, then your class is viable in raids in general. So this video will only consider Murzat Overseer. This boss choice might make some classes look weaker than they are on bosses that favor them. However, it is still a somewhat good boss fight to take to judge viability, because each class can theoretically hit its benchmark on the boss. Other bosses would introduce much more severe bias. Viability of a DPS class. The raid boss Murzat Overseer has 22 million health and an enrage timer of 6 minutes. In order to avoid the enrage timer, a squad needs 62,000 DPS in total, averaging to 6,200 per player. If you assume that we have 4 support players that do essentially 0 DPS, this pushes the requirement up to 10,000 DPS per DPS player. So we could say that any DPS build that manages to do 10,000 DPS is a viable build at Murzat Overseer, and thus a viable build overall. This would not even be wrong. It has been shown in the past that raids can be cleared with all kinds of ridiculous builds, be that level 78 raids, Minion Master Necromancer only, or running a comp that contains at least one DPS Weaver. In art, restrictions breed creativity, and many players impose challenges on themselves in Guild Wars 2 as well. Why does this happen? Once you have been clearing raids for a while, you will realize that learning how to do the raid was the biggest challenge already. Now that you know how to clear them, you can quite easily clear them as often as you like. Since nearly all approaches will lead to a successful clear, the question shifts to how you would like to achieve the clear. It can be exciting to try different ways of completing the same challenge. In other sports or games, speedrunning arises more naturally. Succeeding at running 100 meters, for example, is not really difficult for most people, and there is probably no long-term engagement in that activity alone. The more natural challenge is to run those 100 meters very fast. You will probably not go for a world record yourself, but you're going to chase a personal best, even at a casual level. This keeps 100 meter sprints interesting to do, even though there is never going to be a balance patch or new content for it. In Guild Wars 2, most players are not interested in speedrunning raids. They have 2 goals. Number 1, be able to clear the raid within a reasonable time frame, and number 2, enjoy playing the game. I would add a third component actually. Don't be a burden on the 9 other players, carry your own weight. Since those 3 goals are quite essential for most players, we need to find ways to meet all of them. And number 1 and 3 are about viability. So let us look at number 3, not being a burden others have to carry. I think this is the key to define viability. You would want that your DPS is somewhat similar to the DPS of the other players in your party. To see if a class is a viable DPS class, an easy rule of thumb is to seek out the Banner Berserker benchmark. This build is a supportive DPS build, so a full DPS build should be able to beat it. Every build with a comparable or higher benchmark can be considered viable. This would place the cutoff of viability at about 33,000 DPS. But benchmarks will not tell the full story. They are done by experts of those classes, and you are most likely not an expert. So let us return to Mersat Overseer and find out how well players actually play those classes. Performance. As you can see here, the median DPS, marked by the red line, is just above 25,000. If our goal is not to get carried by our group, we should try to be somewhere around that DPS number. If we are okay with being slightly behind, let's take 24,000 DPS as our minimum goal. If all DPS classes in your squad do 24,000 DPS, Mersat Overseer dies in just over 2 minutes. That's good enough. Let's see how we get 24,000 DPS. Your DPS number on Mersat Overseer depends on 4 factors. The DPS benchmark of your build. For example, Power Holosmith has a benchmark of 37,000 DPS. Your gameplay. From 0% to 100%, how much of the class potential you use during the fight. Boon quality. 100% are golem-like, perfect boons. If you have very bad boons, this factor might be around 50%. Bad boons, however, affect everyone in your subgroup, so if the boons are bad, it will not really cause you to fall behind others. And build quality. Benchmarks are done with buff food, stat infusions, ascended gear. If you lack stat infusions, set this factor to 97.5%. Not running food, utility, wrong gear, exotic gear, wrong traits even, all of that can lower the score drastically. Assuming that you don't have stat infusions, which sets the build quality to 97.5%, and that boons are nearly perfect, boon quality to, let's say, 95%, the practical benchmark of Power Holosmith is then 34,271 DPS. This means that your gameplay score needs to be at least 70% in order to beat the 24,000 DPS goal. Obviously, if boons are worse, it would need to be higher, but since other players are equally affected by bad boons, you can still say that a gameplay score of 70% is acceptable on Holosmith. The same goes for a run where a lot of people go downstate and you have to spend some time reviving them. This costs everyone DPS, so do not worry if you don't actually break the 24,000 DPS in a very messy fight. As long as your gameplay performance is 70%, you should be able to keep up with others, which is what we care about here. But people might, wrongly in my opinion, say that Power Holosmith is really difficult to play, so let's look at an easier DPS build. Power Daredevil. The benchmark for this is 34,600 DPS. We adjust for imperfect boons and lack of stat infusions, and we arrive at 32,048 DPS. Our gameplay score now needs to be 75%, so 5 percentage points higher than for the Holosmith. Maybe Daredevil is really that much easier to play, so it could be worth considering this if you're struggling with the Holosmith rotation. Let's look at a Daredevil that is using the trait Staff Master. This trait eliminates the need for emptying your endurance and is therefore supposedly easier to play. I do not have an exact benchmark for it, because it's not really a good setup, but let's assume the benchmark is 32,500 DPS. Again, factoring our lack of infusions and boons, we arrive at 30,103 DPS, as the maximum of which we are capable of. So unless we can perform at now 80% of the potential DPS, make sure that you flank the boss all the time, are above 90% for your Scholar Rune and trait bonuses, use Bounding Dodger for the 10% modifier in your burst, etc, etc, we may start to struggle to keep up with others. The question you must ask yourself now, is the Staff Master Daredevil easy enough to make this good performance possible? Or would you be better off with a harder build that is also stronger? On the extreme end, A Condi Renegade with its 40,000 DPS benchmark only needs to perform at like 65% of its potential, which is commonly known as not falling asleep during the rotation. Even with that 65%, they will still be able to beat 24,000 DPS. That's the effect of such a high benchmark. Nevertheless, all those builds clearly have a viable path to 24,000 DPS. For some you need to perform better, for others the class does most of the work for you, although the class might be harder to play. What works better for you is up to you to find out. Although from my experience it is often more profitable to just learn the higher benchmark option and let the class do the heavy lifting. In the background, you can see me play a core thief build. While I have not found an actual benchmark for it, it is probably below 30,000 DPS. This makes it quite challenging to hit 24,000 DPS. This is an example of a rather easy rotation on a build that is so bad the simplicity of the build will not save you. Going Staffmaster Daredevil would just be better. Nevertheless, if you spend time and practice this dagger thief build, it can still be viable. To summarize, viability comes as a combination of the theoretical benchmark and how well you can play it. There are raid bosses where other factors can play a role that are harder to quantify, where for example power classes can suddenly become easily more viable due to extremely short phases. However, Mersat Overseer is a good boss to test the general viability of your class and to find out whether your performance with the class in a raid is good enough to be able to keep up with other players. In general though, a high benchmark you can chill with. Low benchmark you have to work for viability. But in essence, most builds can be viable if you're good enough with them. Or are they? When asked about viability by a new raider, I'd be a liar if I recommended Core Dagger Thief. This build is awful, and just because I can sometimes keep up with other players, that does not make it a good idea. Play it if you are bored with the game and want to challenge yourself, but do not play it if raiding is hard or new for you. So I'd like to make one limitation. Let's not call builds viable that are much worse than a different variant of basically the same build. Dagger Thief is not viable. If I'm honest, I'd argue that Staffmaster Daredevil is not viable either, since the gameplay pattern that keeps it at 32,500 DPS is as difficult as the full build, and it plummets to 30,000 DPS if you use a simpler pattern. But that is not a hill I need to die on here. But we can probably all agree that Dagger Thief is strictly worse than the Daredevil options. In the same way, we can exclude most low DPS core classes and many trait, weapon and gear variations that do not drastically increase the simplicity of the class. A Condition Renegade with healing power trinkets, for example, may still be able to hit 24,000 DPS, but why would we ever call that viable? However, it is not always easy to say build A is a strict upgrade of build B. Scrapper is not always worse than Holosmith, and Reaper is not always worse than Scourge. Spellbreaker not always worse than Berserker. It is better to judge all of those classes individually, and all of them are viable in the hands of the right player. So, according to those rules I've laid out, if you played a viable build, you will not be a burden on your fellow raiders if you have enough practice on your rotation. Since you are allowed to play basically any class and spec as a DPS completely in line with this definition, I hope having fun is covered as well. You will find a class that you enjoy. So, let's turn to the final goal, being able to clear a raid within a reasonable time frame. In other words, avoiding vibes. Utility. DPS is not everything. Utility also counts. What do we mean by utility? Crowd control? Unique buffs? Cleave, pulls, ways to control the small adds in boss fights? Extra healing for others? Extra defensive boons? And some might even add independence, which allows you to keep fighting when things go very wrong for others. Lately, the idea has become more prominent that DPS classes are not primarily about DPS. Sure, they say, it's good to have a class that does viable DPS, but is an extra 2000 here or there really going to save you? It's much more important to be able to provide utility as a DPS player. DPS does not decide a fight, but a clutch barrier application will. Therefore, this calls into question the viability of DPS classes without that kind of utility. Specifically those who can't provide extra healing or boons and are heavily dependent on others helping them survive. So, you should only play DPS classes with utility. I disagree with this conclusion. Let us take a look at the current support meta. For simplicity, I only list the most popular variant. Other options exist and are also viable. Heal Druid, Heal Firebrand, Alacrigate, and Inspiration Chronomancer. These classes and builds easily provide permanent uptime of the most important boons, and I can make situational adjustments to cover everything. Crowd control, pulse, reflex, stability, Aegis, strong revives, and more. All raid content in Guild Wars 2 can be solo healed by an experienced Druid healer. Druid is known to be one of the weakest in terms of healing output. In order to dish out the same healing as a solo Druid, 2 healers need to be running at most at 50% capacity, which is very easy to achieve. So this meta composition is very safe. If you have a wipe with this team composition, there have been severe gameplay errors. There are mechanics that can one-shot, where no amount of safety would help you, by the way, and there are certain limits to how well those classes can carry you if you really try to troll them. Nevertheless, a DPS class does not actually need to bring more utility to make a clear with that team composition safe. The clear already is safe. It is just not foolproof. So you could mandate more DPS classes with extra healing and defensive boons to make it nearly foolproof, and call the non-utility DPS classes weak or not viable. I fear a future where this mentality takes hold. I do not want the community to become convinced that it is necessary to run foolproof compositions consisting only of the most defensive and the most broken DPS builds. It would create a climate where new players are told to abandon their thieves or engineers, for example. If you want a glimpse of what the raid LFG could look like, you can check the Fractal CM and T4 LFGs. If you want to do fractals on certain DPS classes, you are simply out of luck. And all of that for what? Most of the time, having 4000 barrier on top of the health bar does not actually do anything. The barrier will just run out, or it will replace the healing you would get from your healers. In the end, you kill the boss, just like you would have without the added safety layer. Scourges and Firebrands, as DPS classes, are not really more effective than other DPS options at doing DPS. What they have going for them is the safety that they add to an already safe team composition. To me, calling 20 DPS builds bad or not viable just because of the occasional wipe they can cause, because they did not have more healing or barrier, that seems like a severe overreaction. It is only warranted if you absolutely never want to fail a raid boss, and I don't think that's the right mentality to have when you try to do something difficult. There are 2 more reasons why we should not expect utility from DPS classes. Number 1, a nerf to the currently overpowered supportive DPS classes is inevitable. People will need to get used to less safe clears again. But can they go back? When Boon Thief got nerfed 2 months ago, most groups, for no reason actually, stopped playing it on Matthias Gabriel. Overnight, Matthias went from reliable to clear to seemingly impossible, at least on the LFG. In all those years with Boon Thief, people forgot how to play without it. So, going for safe clears is a good idea, but going for foolproof clears all the time inhibits your progress. Number 2, is it enjoyable? It may be funny to spend an evening stomping through raid wings running 6 DPS scourges. Is it going to be engaging week after week? Think of all the raid clears you're going to do until End of Dragon's release. It will never matter what you do in the clear. All mistakes are covered by 6000 barrier and 20,000 health, signet revives and 1 scourge running blood magic. Is that fun? Nothing new to discover? Forever playing the same class? To return to the 100-meter sprint analogy. You have put yourself in a motorized wheelchair and are driving down the track. At that point you have defeated the point of 100-meter sprints, right? Ultimately, I think all raiders at all levels, from newbie to veteran, are better off if we do not make the viability of a DPS class hinge on its utility. Having utility is strong, but having no utility on a DPS class is just fine as well. The standard support meta brings all the utility that is needed to enable even inexperienced groups that have learned the mechanics of a boss to reliably clear it. If you, personally as a DPS player, think that adding a bit more safety can lead to better results, that's great. Go for it, I will not hinder you. Having an extra firebrand or an extra scourge can be a huge boon to many groups, but it's incredibly unfair to judge other DPS classes by that standard. The result would be a meta where most DPS classes need not apply, because people are convinced that they are not worth playing. And if we are to survive and grow as a raid community, we need to avoid this at all costs. Yes, the current meta is not balanced, the safety from DPS classes is ridiculous. But let's remember this, a DPS player is there to have big damage numbers. If they can do that, that is viable in my book. I will end with a thought I've had while watching a live stream. It was the Slophosaur group that was already running 4 condition scourges, and there was a debate whether or not to play DPS Weaver in this meta. The lack of built-in safety of Weaver would mean frequent downstates, maybe even death, severely lowering DPS output. But then it hit me. Which group could be better for the squishiest of all classes than the one that is running 8 classes trying to keep a Weaver alive? Maybe it is time, especially in this supportive raid meta, to not bury Weavers, but the Weaver memes. Thanks for watching.